The pandemic has allowed parents to have an eye into the education of their children. Numerous videos have surfaced with angry parents speaking up at school board meetings. Some parents have even been deemed terrorists for speaking their minds. The Virginia gubernatorial election should have placed the political world on notice that parents are paying attention. Virginia, a typically blue state, was shocked to find Republican Glenn Youngkin as the new governor. Recently, Florida's new controversial law labeled by the media as Don't Say Gay has placed childhood education as the new political battlefront. With all of this playing out in real time, it feels like no one is taking the time to see the confusion we are causing our children. Welcome to the garden. I have an 11-year-old. Jeff, you have a 4-year-old and
15 to 11-year-olds and a 4-year-old.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So we're in the middle of a lot of this stuff that's going on, and we get to see a lot of the confusion shaping our children today. I found an article I'm going to read to you, Jeff. I just want to know what you feel about this. Sure. He hasn't heard this at all, so and I'll tell you where it came from, but I'll tell you after the fact. And this is a quote. These boys and girls enter our organization at 10 years of age and often for the first time get a little fresh air. After 4 years of the young folk, they go on to the Hitler Youth, where we have them for another 4 years. And even if they're still not complete National Socialists, they go to labor service and are smoothed out there for another 6-7 months. And whatever class concessions or social status might still be left, the Wehrmacht, whatever that is, German armed forces will take care of that. This was written by Adolf Hitler in 1938. It almost feels like we're going through some sort of thing like this today when we're looking at a lot of the things that are going on in education. It's hard not to look this way. Democrats are blaming Republicans and Republicans are blaming Democrats for the same type of ideology. But the reality is, from what I'm seeing, our kids are under attack and we need to really pay attention to what's coming to our kids today. And there's a lot of reasons for what's going on. But even with that, it's concerning. Like a lot of the things that are going on and being taught to our kids is really starting to affect our kids mentally. I don't know about you, but I see my daughter come home. She goes straight to her bedroom and she'll sit in there for most of the day. She doesn't like to socialize very much. Some days she's just trying to process things that have happened throughout the day. But I'm curious what you think about what I just read to you.
Well, I think that it might feel like that resonates in today's society because we're using a lot of the same trigger words. And I think that's all it is. I think what you're hearing is when you listen to news organizations on the right, Fox News, Newsmax, I don't know what you listen to, AON, any of that stuff.
I really don't listen to any of them, to be honest with you. I listen to podcasts. I listen to, I'll follow links. I go down rabbit holes like a lot of people.
Yes.
I really don't commit to any specific organization that I go to.
And I would question what kind of podcast you're listening to because, like I said, a lot of that is just trigger words,
Sure.
Just divisive language. And it's meant to focus on our kids as victims of attack. And I think a lot of the problems we have with kids is the same thing that we've always had a problem with our kids. Societally, I think the increase in damage being done to our kids is just social media, is them with each other, is them online with their bullies, where there is no safe space for a kid to go, especially if they're in their rooms by themselves. And if they just have social media, a lot of that is a problem right now.
It's a lot deeper than social media. So my kid has access to a lot of things. I try to keep it under control, but she tends to tap in. I mean, kids are smart today. Just the other day, my wife saw a TikTok video that my daughter got access to that was telling how to commit suicide.
Uh-huh.
These things shouldn't be in kids' hands. And I don't blame the schools for that, but there is a lot of information coming through the schools. And I was talking a little bit in the intro about DeSantis and his Don't Say Gay bill.
Yeah.
It's triggered a lot of different things, and I'll go down that path a little bit later, but there's a lot of things that have been coming out of that area of the United States. We've been hearing a lot about the critical race theory being taught in schools. We've been hearing a lot about the transgender thing going on, and parents have been pretty upset about some of this stuff being pushed onto their children. And I don't think it's necessarily the topics. I mean, it probably is, but it's more that some of the stuff parents feel like it's not the school's job to teach. And so with the DeSantis thing, the only reason I bring it up right now is because several months ago, parents started speaking up. And I think of DeSantis because I believe some of the first videos I saw coming out were around Florida. I did see him in Virginia as well. And it was about parents standing up to school boards and yelling at school board members. School boards were locking parents out, wouldn't even let them in to discuss. These are public events that parents are supposed to be able to attend, and they were being held out by police officers. The National School Board Association sent a letter off to the president asking him to enact laws that would deem these people domestic terrorists. They were comparing them to domestic terrorists because they want answers. They want to know what's going on in these schools, why their kids are learning things that they're learning. And not only are the kids learning these things, but these kids are confused. They don't know who's safe and who's not at this point. From what I understand from some of these videos that I've seen, these kids are being turned against their parents. Some kids, there was a video that I just watched just the other day where the school, this lady was speaking out because the school basically told her that she needed her young daughter's permission to talk to her or to talk to the parent about anything that they discussed in school. Pretty wild.
That I haven't heard about.
Yeah, that one just came out a couple of days ago. This lady was talking, but it had to do with her daughter. I think her daughter was like 11 or 12. The school board was telling her she had to have permission to talk to them about her child because her child was identifying as an opposite sex of how she was born. And her child was concerned that the parents wouldn't understand. And so the school was trying to help facilitate the child and protect the child is what they thought they were doing. But in the meantime, they were inadvertently turning the child against the parent. The parent didn't even have an opportunity to talk to their child. And stuff like this keeps happening over and over again. We keep seeing videos about it. And it may only be a percentage of a percentage of a percent, but it's happening. And that's what we see.
I understand the feeling of one is too much.
Sure.
Right. It doesn't matter what the percentage. If one parent is prevented from talking to their school, their child's school about their child, that's too much. At the same time, you have to wonder if the child didn't want to talk to the parents and was relying solely on the school for the information, why should the school not inform that kid about their questions? Where is the right place to learn about that? On the schoolyard or on social media, which 75% of our teenagers are using and younger. But where do you learn about that? If you feel like your parents genuinely will not understand, if they are anti-trans movement, anti-LGBTQ, then where do you learn it?
I don't know.
From a trusted, reliable adult source would be
that's the problem.
Would be
is
nice.
The schools are not very trustworthy right now. That's what we're seeing.
And
they're acting out in certain ways. They are going against a lot of parents' wishes. And some of it becomes very, very controversial because when we start talking about critical race theory, right, there's going to be a lot of people that are angry about that. There's a whole population that believes that the kids should learn about that. I don't have a problem with the kids learning about critical race theory, but I don't believe any kid should be made to feel guilty about something that they didn't do.
Why do you think that, we're going to be all over the place here, but why would you think that they would be pressured to feel guilty about something they didn't do?
The kids, because that's
just by teaching them history.
That's how it's coming out.
That's how people are talking about it.
That's how it's coming out. So my daughter just recently had an experience at school. Her teacher is a white lady that has 2 black children. And It's not her teacher anymore. This woman is a terrible person. But what she did is she put on the video about Emmett Till. And if nobody knows about Emmett Till is he was a black man, 14 years old, said something to a white woman, was strung up behind a horse, was drug around town, and at the end he was shot in the head. The mother was so traumatized by this that she ordered for an open casket at his burial, and she had professional photographers come in. And the whole purpose of this was so that the kids, or the people that committed this horrible act, would live with this for the rest of their lives. They would be stuck with this. And I mean, she's absolutely did the right thing because it's out now. There's a lot of things going on. I think they just passed the Emmett Till no lynching law that just happened.
Yeah.
So, but prior to putting this film on about Emmett Till, her teacher told her, if anything makes you feel uncomfortable, too bad. That's not appropriate for a teacher.
No, that, especially for an 11-year-old, that is a disgusting display.
Yes. And the documentary actually showed Emmett Till's dead body. It showed black people hanging in the street. I mean, this is absolutely history.
That's history. That's not what critical race theory is, right? You're looking at one example, albeit a very close example to you because it happened to your daughter. And that's disgusting that any child should be subjected to that, to viewing that material. That's not a good reason to reject critical race theory as a viable topic to teach in our classes.
Oh, and I don't reject it. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. I have no problem with them learning about history, but they shouldn't be made to feel guilty. And that's the problem that's getting out there. That's what people are seeing.
Well, that's what people are talking about.
Yes.
We don't know that that's what the kids are feeling and how they're being pressured to feel about the certain topic.
Sure. Well, the new Supreme Court nominee, Jackson, there's been a lot of information in the news lately about her. I mean, obviously, the Republicans are going to try to oppose her. They don't want any of the Democrats' picks to go, just like Democrats don't want any of the, like this is ridiculous.
Party politics.
Yeah. I mean, we're all a bunch of high schoolers here at this point, but the reality is they brought up her being on the school board, and they were talking about some of the things that her school was talking about with regard to some of this stuff. I don't even know if they deem it critical race theory, but they were talking about how kids are inherently racist when they're born, and that we have to teach it out of them. These are things that I've been seeing in the news, and that's not a good thing.
I would question where you're getting your news from, where you're seeing this information.
This information it comes from an article in the Washington Post. The article is talking about Senator Ted Cruz when he's questioning Ketanji Jackson about she's a board member of a private school in DC, and in the school they actually have a book called Anti-Racist Babies that he was questioning her about. He pulled it off the shelf from her school, and he said that in the article they talk about how kids can choose their own gender, and it also teaches them about white privilege as well.
Okay.
So these are the type of things that are being taught in the schools, and I don't have a problem with the kids learning. It's just how they're learning.
My only point is that you're quoting an article that quotes Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is known for using inflammatory, divisive language, rhetoric in order to
and I get that.
sway.
Okay, so let's go back to just the basics about critical race. What we can agree on.
Sure.
So critical race theory is a system that teaches and explores why laws tend to favor one group of individuals over another group of individuals.
And society. Why society? Right.
Now, do you think that's inappropriate for
that's
fifth
good
grader?
enough? That's good enough. Well, do I think that's appropriate for a fifth grader to learn?
When should they
Yes.
start learning that stuff?
As soon as they start teaching any type of history.
So how does that not teach a sense of discomfort to these children?
Well, that's up to the educator.
Because children aren't, I don't think they're racist at that age. They become, well, I mean, depends on who their parents are, I guess. Absolutely. Right. But I mean, generally speaking, I don't think the kids will become racist at that age. Kids will run around playing with each other. They don't even point out that they're different.
Right.
Not until they're a little bit older.
My 4-year-old has no concept.
Sure. So what becomes a good age for this to happen?
You should teach it as soon as you start teaching history, right? So,
Well, you can teach the history.
5th, 6th grade.
You can teach a history, but
If
when do
we
you
have
start
to-
saying,
arbitrarily choose, I would say 5th, 6th grade, as soon as kids start to understand their differences.
so you put out there that, hey, Johnny, you're in a lot better position than Joe over here because you're white and Joe's black.
No,
and this world was built around you.
No,
This society was built around you. So you have a lot more opportunities because of your skin color than Joe over here.
you don't.
That becomes the problem. And this
That's
leads
a
into
faulty premise, in my opinion.
Well, that's the thing. We don't know what critical race theory is. We don't know what's being taught. I know from my experience what happened with my daughter, and they wouldn't claim that that's critical race theory either. That
No,
was a crappy teacher,
Yes.
which I agree. But I think that's the fear about critical race theory is we really don't know what it's all about.
We do know what it's all about. You just explained what it was about.
Well, for you and me, that's what I interpreted.
Well,
but
what
we
it
have a Supreme
is.
Court justice saying that it's not even taught in schools. It's being taught in
It's being
college
taught
legal
later
classes.
in college legal. Right. So
So-
she's saying that American history is being taught and that this is like, it's not called critical race theory. It's just American history. And it's how we treated minorities.
Which I have no problem with.
Right. And that's all that's being talked about in grade schools.
But what about this advantage?
But as soon as you label it critical race theory, that's the problem. And what about the advantage?
What about the
You're talking white privilege.
white privilege?
What about white privilege?
Why would we want our kids to even know that stuff like that exists? Because we're in a society where we're trying to be equal, and we're setting them up on a stance where this person thinks that he's already got advantages over this person. So we're continuing to hold this person down because we're saying, hey, Joe, you're black. You don't have an opportunity to survive or to get out there and excel because you're black and this society wasn't built for you.
No, you don't say you say, and they may take it as you, but you don't have to point out that you don't have you can't succeed. It's not what their point is. They're saying historically, or even now in modern day, yes, you're going to, like, some people have it harder. They don't have the head start that other people do. It's the same as being born poor. If your parents were rich, you would be a different person. You would have had a leg up coming right out of high school. You would have finished high school, presumably.
Sure. And that, you know what, that's a bigger issue than actual.
Right. That's socioeconomic.
I mean, that's way bigger effect than almost anything else in this country because the laws favor the rich.
The laws favor the rich.
And they continue to.
The laws favor the white and rich.
Well, mostly because the white are the rich, or they were
They're
traditionally
the
the
people,
rich.
in power making the laws.
Exactly. And I understand that. But that's who the laws favor. It favors, I mean, it makes complete sense if you look at just the other day, the slap heard around the world.
Yeah.
Anybody would have done that outside of, a celebrity, and they would have been taken to jail immediately.
Well, they offered to take him to jail, and Chris Rock said no.
It wouldn't even matter.
That's true, actually.
It wouldn't even matter. I mean, that's
True.
assault.
Right.
So that has nothing to do with color. That has to do with, and a lot of people are putting it on color because we're in this fight right now, but that has to do with celebrity status. That has
Right.
nothing to do with color.
Yeah.
I think, and they talk about if a white celebrity slapped a black celebrity. Well, that's probably true. He may have went to jail. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell. It depends on who that celebrity is. Will Smith is one of the top celebrities out there. Like, he's coming out with all kinds of stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know what would happen if it was a white guy, but the reality is he's wealthy and he's going to get off the hook a lot easier than somebody like you or me.
Right.
So, but that's where the problem is, in my opinion.
Right. So you take away his celebrity, and what is he?
He's a black person.
He's a black person. And how do you think any regular black person would be treated?
He'd be in jail.
He'd be in jail, or worse, or dead at the hands of trigger happy cops who all they know is somebody assaulted somebody. And if there was any resistance, if they felt like there was any resistance whatsoever, they would have dispatched that threat.
And I feel like that is a false comparison.
You can feel that way, but historically,
But,
we're looking
how
at
many black people are killed by cops every year?
A black American is 2.5 times more likely to be killed than a white by police.
Sure, but how many black people are killed by police every year?
Drawn down by race from 2017 to 2022, you're looking at an average of about 400 people, 400 whites killed
Per
by
year?
police. Yeah.
Okay.
And about 230
Black people?
blacks.
Okay,
killed
that's a
by
lot
police.
higher than I thought. I figured
And-
it'd be like 50.
But look at how many more whites there are in the U.S. than blacks.
No, and it's not okay either way.
Right.
Like
There's definitely a disparity there.
sure. But a white person could have been shot too then.
Right. 2.5 times less likely.
So anyways, I mean, we talk about a wealth problem, that becomes the problem. And I mean, race has definitely played a role throughout history. We know that. I mean, we've seen it, we've
Right.
experienced it. We've also seen a difference with what's going on as well. The argument to the other side, I'm not going to make a lot of fans this way, I know, but regardless, I have a lot of bosses throughout my life and above me now that are people of color. Either they're black or they're Hispanic. Very few white people are above me in my job where I work, and it's a government job. When I worked in the hospitals, I had a lot of black people that were in charge of me there as well, and Filipinos and Latinos. So to say that the white people now have these crazy advantage, there's probably some truth to it, but I don't think it's to the extent that people think it is. I can't go to school and get an education and get a scholarship because I'm black. I can go to school and get a scholarship because I'm Native American and I'm like 2%.
Right.
So I mean, I get the advantages. I understand that, but at the same time, these are advantages that are out there for other people that we don't have as white people.
But those advantages are a reaction to the extreme disadvantage that they begin with.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
And completely understand that. But that's the thing. It needs to be a fair comparison of what's going on. And
Well, there is
unfortunately,
no fair comparison because it's never been fair.
it's never been fair.
And so this is a big pendulum that we're trying to wield here, and you have to go from one extreme to the other before you're ever going to shake it down to middle ground. They've been at a disadvantage for years, and so a helping hand is not the evil that I think some people try to see in that.
Okay. Fair enough. So we should go after our children to pay back for any of the sins of our ancestors.
I'm not talking about reparations. I'm not talking about making them feel guilty by teaching critical race theory.
But that's the problem. That's the concern that parents have about critical race theory.
We don't teach critical wealth theory.
We should.
Do you think that you think we should? So do you think people should be made feel guilty because they're born poor
No.
or wealthy? Excuse me.
Yeah.
You think they should be made to feel guilty?
No, I don't think people should be made to feel guilty for anything because everybody's experience is completely
Do you think they would be made to
individualized.
feel guilty?
If we taught
they're born
critical
wealthy.
wealth theory, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that we're going to do it to bring another portion of our society down. That's how we're trained. Like that's how we've been indoctrinated. Like we just had a show just recently talking about the student loan crisis
Yeah.
and how people have this mentality that if I don't get it, you shouldn't have it.
Right.
Like we have this bred into our society that, I mean, it's a horrible, like that's our pandemic that we're dealing with. It's just the way we think. We're not out there to try to help other people.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I didn't want to go down this whole critical race theory. I want that
I know,
to be,
it's been
I want it to be its own show. I
Yeah,
really do.
I know. We've been on this for a while when actually what we're talking about is just indoctrinating kids in general about different topics. I think it's funny that the only reason we know about any of this stuff is because, as you mentioned in the intro, we've been forced to look at it, and we overall have been lazy parents when it comes to our kids' education.
We've turned a lot of our trust over to a school system that we didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
That's like letting a stranger watch our kids is basically what we've done. And the stranger was giving us candy. So we're like, hey, he can't be that bad.
And I wouldn't say we didn't know anything about it. We're not nearly as involved as we were forced to be when we had to homeschool our kids for a year.
I read this, or I watched this video a long time ago with this Native American police officer. You should really look for this. It's pretty wild. He was a Native American police chief, I believe, down in Tucson, Arizona. And he had a meeting with, I think a Rothschild. It was either Rockefeller or Rothschild. I'm pretty sure it was a Rothschild. Who's the governor down there? Do you know? Is it Rothschild?
No, I'm not sure.
It's one of them. Anyways, he had this meeting with him, and he asked him about women's rights. And the Rothschild asked him, he's like, you know why we helped women get their right to vote and to work and everything, right? And he's like, well, yeah, because, you know, it's the right thing to do. You know, we want women out there. We want them to be able to work and to be able to, you know, feel valuable in society. And the Rothschild looked at him and said, no, not at all. He said that the Rothschild told him that the reason we did that is because we realized that we were only collecting from half of the population. If we could get the women working, then we would be able to collect from 100% of the population. We'd be able to get taxes from everybody. Like we would have massive wealth, massive income.
But I wonder what time frame that.
This was in the 1980s that he was talking about. Yes, 1970s, 1980s, like late 70s, early 80s.
Yes.
And he was talking about this. Then he was talking, he said, you know, we have a plan that now that we've got both parents working, now we can go in the schools and the government will be able to raise their children because both parents are working now. So they're not going to be raising their children. Their children are going to be spending a majority of their time with us. So we will be able to control who their kids are.
Well, the kids always spent more time at school than they did with their parents.
They did.
Even when the woman was staying home.
They did. But now we have both parents working. They're working 8 to 10 hour days. Kids go to school for what, 6 hours, 5 hours a day?
7.
They come home. They have to go to daycare. So now they're learning in another organization. And then they come home. They spend an hour, 2 hours with their parents because their parents are so exhausted. Their parents don't want to help them with their homework. They're like, come on. All right, come on. You know, that's 4, that's 6. You know, they don't spend time helping them a lot of times. You know, I do my best, but, you know, sometimes I'm exhausted and it's hard. So you check yourself out of your kid's life and you don't do it on purpose, but you do it.
Sure.
And so now the pandemic hits. Parents are staying home. A lot of them have to work from home. School's going on and parents are looking in on their kids and they're seeing this stuff going on, this indoctrination. They're learning things that they're not happy about. It forced some of these parents to go down to the schools and start looking through some of their books. And
so that gets us to an interesting point. I wonder what it is that's being taught in the schools that makes you feel like our kids are a victim. Because I don't remember if it was during the show opening or earlier you mentioned that what they're doing to our kids, I think was the phrase you said. So I wonder what it is that they're teaching. I know you had the one experience with your daughter's teacher that was egregious, that was awful, that was inexcusable. But I wonder what else is out there.
Me too.
Is out there that
me too. All I see
problem.
is from other parents. And that's the problem is all we see is these things that are like my experience, parents speaking out about these horrible incidents, right?
Right.
We're not
Which are few and far between.
I mean, there's enough stuff out there. It's hard to know.
I mean, there's also teachers in Tennessee, I think it was, who was, they were holding a prayer meeting and it was a mandatory thing for these kids to go to a prayer meeting in the school when that is not supposed to be the case at all. So there's all kinds of things happening in the schools from both sides that are inexcusable.
Sure. And we have police officers out there donating money to the homeless, but you know, these police officers are out killing people. You know, I mean, there's things that happen all the time, but we don't see the good. We see the bad.
Sure.
So I understand where you're going with that kind of stuff. I don't know, but school is just one of those things. And all I'm seeing is these videos. It's social media. It's more division. I mean, it's creating problems, but we're seeing that it's having an effect on the kids. There's a statistic in the USA Today. It was talking about suicide rates in children. Granted, the kids are 10 to 24 years old, but there's been a 60% increase in suicide rates from 2007 through 2018. It used to be 6.8 per 100,000. And now they're seeing 31.4 per 100,000 suicide rate. That's a suicide rate.
So what's changed so much during that time? It wasn't the whatever our teachers are teaching our kids. It's not the indoctrination of anything from school. It's really social media exploded starting around 2007 with MySpace, and then Facebook, obviously, and Instagram, Snapchat. It's like it just exploded, and our kids are spending far too much time on social media. And we know that social media is linked with depression,
Sure.
especially in kids,
Uh-huh.
because they're always searching the likes. And if they don't get the likes, they have to encounter their bullies in a public space where now their grandparents can see what's being said on their Facebook page.
Social media is absolutely an issue. I mean, 100% it's an
Yeah.
issue today. Schools aren't helping. They're not. I mean, all we can see is these fights going on. Like I said in the opening, with the DeSantis creating this law, teachers are fighting back. I mean, they're just social media, TikTok videos, people are upset because they can't talk about their relationship with their same-sex spouse. All this stuff is going on social media. Don't know what's being taught to the kids. There was a video played on Ben Shapiro. I know you hate Ben Shapiro, but this video was a teacher talking about how upset he was. He was almost in tears, and he was talking about how upset he was because he couldn't tell his kids that he went sailing with his boyfriend, because if his kids asked about his boyfriend, then he would go to jail. That's not what the law states, number one.
Sure.
And number two, why would a teacher have to tell his kids about his personal stuff? The teachers are there to teach. It makes you wonder what else is going on in these classrooms. I understand there needs to be a trusting environment,
Yes, there needs to be a trusting environment. There needs to be, you need to feel like you know your teacher.
but teachers aren't there to be our kids'
They're not.
friends.
No, they're not. But some of my
they're
best,
there to be an authoritative figure.
right. The only teachers that really resonated with me and made a huge change in my life are the ones who let a little bit of their personality in.
Sure. But are those the ones? I mean, if my teacher went out and bought me beer, that would resonate with me as well, But
Well, in a different way. I'm talking like, I know that my band director suffered depression because he and I sat down and had a talk about that after class one day, and he's gone now. And that's a very sad thing that I don't even know what else to say about that, but the impact he had on my life was staggering.
but he didn't just come out and tell you he was depressed. You must have told him that you were having issues that
Right.
brought that up.
And he was able
Different.
to relate.
Different story.
That's kind of a different story. You need to let a little bit of yourself in. A teacher needs to be able to have a personality and a personal life that they can talk about in their job with the people who rely on them, right? According to whatever statistics, at least 10 or around 10% of the kids in that class or his classes are going to be gay.
Mm-hmm.
So if they see him talk about his spouse or his boyfriend, that's going to make them feel empowered, and it's going to make them feel better about themselves. It's right now, if you're gay, it still is shrouded in shame a little bit, right? There's a lot more of it that's coming out in schools. And that's a problem that I kind of walk both sides, because I see kids in schools who are confusing friendships with romantic relationships. And so they feel like they're so close to this other person. They feel like it's a romantic relationship when they're not programmed yet. Their body hasn't come to terms with what a romantic relationship even looks like. So they think any involvement on a deeper level is a romantic relationship. And I do feel like that's damaging. And I know you and I have talked about that before. And that does appear to be somewhat damaging, because now as soon as that relationship breaks off to where they're no longer friend or they're no longer romantic because their bodies are not ready for that yet, they see that as a broken romance rather than just a friend.
And we're talking about 10, 11, 12-year-olds. Like,
Yeah,
we're talking about young kids.
Right. I do understand the pushback there. I do understand that that's an issue, but we can teach our kids through those moments. And having a teacher who's afraid to talk about his boyfriend is not the way
But he
that
shouldn't
we
even
solve
be-
these problems.
He shouldn't be afraid to talk about it, but at the same time, there needs to be a limit. Like,
What about a male teacher who says, oh yeah, I went to the store with my wife last night.
There's no problem with that. And there's no problem with a male teacher saying, I went to the store with my husband last night.
And I know he's misinterpreting the law, or he feels like he's under extreme pressure to not bring it up. And that's a problem. He should not be under that pressure. He should be able to bring it up freely with anybody.
Sure.
That's his life.
And and there's no reason he couldn't. I don't have a problem with that kind of stuff. But like, if you're so upset about not being able to talk about your gay relationship, that becomes a problem, because why are you so upset about it? Number one, he could talk about it. But number two, why is it upsetting him so much that he can't share this with other kids? Maybe he's trying to save the 10%. Maybe that's what it is. But I mean, we need to understand why. Why is this happening?
Well, so many times my choir teacher would be talking about her husband because he was in music. He's a great trumpet player, but she would talk about him. If she didn't feel like she could talk about her husband at all, and that had to stay under wraps, and that was a part of herself she had to hide from her students, that would be upsetting to her. Mm-hmm. So I can understand why he would be upset, because he couldn't share this part of his life.
But he can. That's the thing.
Right. I wonder what would make him think that he couldn't.
It's just because I think that a lot of that comes from the media.
From the Florida.
The don't say gay.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with not saying gay. It basically says that classroom instructions by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3, or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. It also prohibits a school district from maintaining procedures that require school district personnel to withhold from a parent or encourage a student to withhold information related to a student's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being.
Okay.
That's what the law says.
So he feels like, as a part of that law, he's not able to talk about his boyfriend.
That's what that teacher feels like.
Right. And so he's
not the only one. There's been like dozens of
I'm
these
sure
TikTok
there are
videos
people
coming out with teachers.
I'm sure there are people who are calling into Ben Shapiro who are worried needlessly.
No. These are TikTok videos being showed. That one was on Ben Shapiro, but I've seen other TikTok videos come out with teachers talking about how they're concerned about this law. One lady came out and she said that my pronoun is mix, because I like my kid, I'm part male, part female. So I just like to be called Mix. So my kids call me Mix Shepherd, and the kids can get it right. So what's the problem with everybody else? That was kind of her thing.
And I understand that there's other videos, but all I was saying is that I question the interpretation of the law when it comes to a Ben Shapiro fan.
Sure. And you're talking about 300 million people in the United States. I get we're getting like 5-10
we're
videos.
Doing onesie twosies.
Yeah. And I understand that. But the reality is we're seeing stuff like this happen, and we can tie it into other things we're experiencing, right? So for example, the kids you were talking about, we know that there's a lot of confusion going on with kids right now with sexual orientation.
Right.
To the point that kids don't know how to develop a mature and natural bonding with another kid that is completely natural, to be able to go play with your friends. Right. I mean, I had guy friends that I hung out with, exclusively.
Right.
We had a blast. That's all we did.
Yeah.
But I wasn't trying to date them.
Right.
Kids don't know the difference anymore. Like, they don't understand.
And there is that misinterpretation, but
why is it there?
But why is it a problem?
Why is it a problem? Because these kids are losing their friendships.
Well, I understand that they're alienated from depression. Their friends. Well, we don't know that. There would need to be a study done to know if there's depression being caused by this misinterpretation of their feelings.
But logically, a kid that is being, friends and then rejected, like, logically.
No, I understand that.
You've been dumped before. I mean, we've all been dumped for different reasons.
No.
There doesn't have to be a study on everything.
There doesn't, but in order to make the claim,
logical.
But if you're going to make a claim that this is worsening the depression of our youth, that's something that needs to be studied.
Oh, I just think it's tying into it. Like,
it very likely is
that are tying into it. And I'm talking from logic, not from, I don't have anything to back it up. Yeah, but I don't think it would be hard to back it up.
And I know how I sound right now. I'm not trying to win an argument. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of, like, what's the actual problem? What's the issue? And yes, we need to teach our kids how to manage friendships, but we've always needed to teach our kids how to manage friendships.
We have.
There's always,
And friendships break up too.
My 4-year-old is always being an asshole to somebody. And I have to be like, no, dude, that's not how we behave. We need to, and it's just part of parenting. And I think as much as I say it's an issue and as much as I wish it wasn't even under consideration, it's going to be a problem teaching my kids how to manage in a world.
You're right.
And that's just a part of it now.
You're right. But I mean, going back to what I was saying when I was trying to talk over you, because I didn't want to hear what you had to say. No, growing up, we had friendships and friendships ended and we were crushed just by our friendships ending.
Yeah.
But I don't think that felt as bad as losing a partner or somebody that we thought we were going to date forever. Because every boyfriend or girlfriend you had, you were going to marry him. That was who you're going to be. That was a much more traumatic experience. That is definitely something that needs to be addressed. Whether DeSantis's law prevents it or not, those are things that kids need to have an ability to talk to somebody about. That's actually something that I would be opposed to with regard to that law, because his law didn't really talk about necessarily gay relationships or gender identity specifically. Mm-hmm. It was talking about gender, right? So we're all a gender regardless, whether we're men claiming we're women or women claiming we're men or men claiming we're men or women claiming we're women. We all have a gender. And that law sounds like that would prevent that kind of a conversation from happening as well. Because it says classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity. So that would include cisgender.
Right.
So I used it right there.
No, right. So it would include cisgender.
That would include cisgender. So it's not like
the societal default is cisgender. And not talking about it is basically like educating as if cisgender is the norm. By absenting the alternate genders from the conversation, we are relegating them to the margins. We are saying that those are not okay. The societal norm is all there is. So that is a shitty law any way you look at it. Right. Just like the law in Arizona, there's a new law in Arizona where a doctor cannot treat anyone under the age of 18 for gender issues, for gender dysphoria. They cannot help you transition. They can't do anything with someone who's under 18 years old with regard to their gender. And that's disgusting.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with it being disgusting. I've told you all along, I have a hard time with arbitrary numbers that we place on everything.
Sure.
I think there's times for different people to have different things for sure.
Some people are ready at 18.
Some people are ready at 16. Some
14.
people are ready at 24. So my issue isn't even about the law being what you said it was. My issue is I hate arbitrary numbers that we throw out there. Hey, you're good enough. You can drink at 21.
I agree. It's just that it has to start somewhere.
It has to. I mean, I don't know how else you would do it other than doing that.
Right.
But at the same time, they're terrible.
Right.
It should be individually based for sure.
And one thing a doctor can do, I would presume, is stop puberty altogether. There's medication they can give kids to stop their puberty from ever happening so that they can buy time until they make a decision. So that's a long time.
What are the long-term health effects? That's the problem.
I know. And
that's what I was talking.
Kids are maturing at 11 years old now, 12 years old. What are you going to make them ride it out until they're 18?
I mean, you're right. But that's the thing. We don't know the long-term effects and there's no studies to support that.
Right.
And I could ask you for some, but there's none. Like
I haven't looked it up, so I wouldn't know if
there's not a lot of long-term studies. That's actually been one of the arguments is what are we doing to these kids? Some of these things are long-term, stopping their puberty or stopping their menstruation or whatever we're doing to these kids. We don't know how that's going to affect them long-term.
Right. And the law that's preventing us from doing anything to help a kid, because as we talked about, the suicide rate of transgender youth is 40%. 40% of transgender people have attempted suicide. 82% have considered it strongly. And so if you can help that number, everybody's all tore up about depression and how we can solve depression, but they're not interested in how to solve it for these people.
Do you think that that confirms the argument that gender dysphoria is a psychological problem when people are that high of a suicide rate within the general population? And I know, I understand that you see it as these people are committing suicide because they can't be who they want to be.
Yes.
But
Because you just like that teacher who's a grown man, who's presumably who is like crying because he can't explain to his kids that he has a boyfriend,
Sure.
right? That's a grown man, presumably. And you take that same mentality or that same sense of self and you superimpose that over the mentality of a 14-year-old, and there's going to be dire consequences if they cannot express themselves in a meaningful way.
So what I'm asking, I guess, is it's hard for me to even phrase what I'm thinking because my brain is turning to mush. But what I'm asking is, do you think that the gender dysphoria psychological or condition, do you think that is caused because of the gender dysphoria, or do you think that population is basically, a lot of people are calling it gender dysphoria? It's a psychological issue, right? These people have an issue, mental issue,
Right.
and they're confirming it because of the suicide rate, but it's like a misrepresentation of why these people are trying to commit suicide, from what I understand what you're saying. But they're confirming it, saying, hey, look, these guys have a psychological issue. They're trying to kill themselves. 82% are trying to kill themselves or have thought about it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like chicken or the egg type thing is what I'm getting at.
It's not. It's really just the disparity between how you feel about yourself versus how you can act in the world.
Right.
Or how the world sees you.
Right.
If you don't feel like you can be genuine and there's no one you can talk to about the genuine you're going to become depressed.
And I get all
and
of
so
that.
it's just the affirmation that they get when they're being treated for their gender dysphoria,
So
which is through hormonal
they're depressed
treatments.
because of society.
They're
But
depressed.
society's saying you're depressed because you think you're something that you're not.
No, the
So
depression.
obviously you're something you're not because you have mental issues.
No.
No, exactly is what you're saying. I'm not phrasing it right to you. Basically, what I hear is people aren't able to express themselves.
Right.
They have nobody to talk to necessarily. So they become depressed. So when they become depressed, it has nothing to do with them being this way. It has to do with them not being able to express who they are, right? Yet we have these doctors up here saying, hey, you have a problem because you think you're this, which is causing you to be depressed. But it's almost the same argument, but the doctors are saying because they have this gender dysphoria, that's depression. It has nothing to do with, basically it's two different things. They're depressed. The doctor's calling them depressed, but he's calling them depressed because they don't know who they are. But they're depressed because they know who they are, and the doctor isn't listening.
Not always. I think that's an oversimplification. So the dysphoria comes from like, I don't feel like I belong in this body, right? This body is grotesque. And I understand your perspective, where you're coming from. And I wasn't going to put it in. I wasn't going to really let on, but my family knows. And, everybody who's important to me knows, I am transgender. I've felt this way since I was 5 years old. I'm non-transitioning because that's not the right time for me right now. I don't think I will in the future, but I don't know what tomorrow brings. But I understand gender dysphoria very well. And I do know that I feel grotesque in this body. I don't like pictures of myself. I don't like to see myself in the mirror. I wear a full beard because it's like a mask I can hide behind so I don't have to see what my actual face looks like. And this dysphoria comes from being in this body. It's a mental disorder, or it's a mental position. And if I was to, when I was younger, because like I said, I've known since I was about 5, if I was to have someone intervene when I was 10, 12, before I went through puberty, and we were able to put a stop to it and buy some time to see if I wanted to transition, that I would have very most likely led a different, more fulfilling life, because I would feel like I'm acting genuinely in the world. I'm not always hiding what I am. And so, yeah, I understand the suicidality with regard to non-affirming gender issues. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh,
You're looking at me blankly.
No, I was letting you talk.
Yeah.
No. So I understand, your situation a lot differently than most situations, because I know the town we grew up in.
And we've talked about it in the past.
And we've talked about it. And the town we grew up in, you had nobody to talk to.
Right.
There's nobody you could have told.
There's an old logger.
You would have been a punching bag.
Yep.
I mean, it was just a big white lumberjack town. And they did not like anybody. I mean, you'd go to the bar on Friday nights just to get in a fight with somebody that you knew.
Yeah.
So I understand like your situation a lot more than I understand a lot of other situations.
Mm-hmm.
I also understand your situation from a 1990s point of view versus a 2020,
right?
Yeah. So I understand that there's a lot more open areas, and I understand they're trying to make laws to try to help protect a lot of this stuff that's going on.
We need to protect our youth.
And I understand that. But in the meantime, we've got to find some sort of balance, like with everything.
Right. So the balance is
we've got to make an open area for people that feel like you did.
But it can't
to
be
have a place.
But it can't be in school. You can't talk about it in school.
Well,
You can't ask your teacher, and if you ask your teacher, they should expose you to your parents.
Well, I don't know. Like,
there's no one you can trust.
See, I'm not in a situation like you grew up, so
I'm
it's hard for me
explaining
to
it.
understand.
Right. I'm posing questions, but I'm just trying to let you know that without people in school, without your teachers, who can you talk to?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, there needs to be something there for people. I mean, that the schools have counselors. Like, if you need to talk to a counselor to expose it, I don't know.
Right.
Like, I don't know what the right answer is, to be honest with you. So, I mean, I could argue with you all day until I'm blue in the face,
right.
and I'm not going to get anywhere.
No, but I'm glad you brought up the counselor, because there's a privilege that's involved between a counselor and their client or patient.
Sure.
Right. And that needs to be there. So I would expect if my child talks to their counselor, my child feels like they can't come to me, the counselor is not going to call me and say anything about it unless there is risk involved.
And I get it.
Immediate
I
risk.
mean, we can go back to an argument that happened 20 years ago about kids being sexually active, and, you know, people not being able to tell the parents about them being sexually active,
Right.
and how kids are now able to go get birth control without their parents' consent. Like I understand all that stuff. I really do. I think it has to do, Jeff, honestly, I think it has to do with people feel like this is being pushed versus being open. Like, there's no fluidity to this at all. It's being pushed really hard. And because it's being pushed, there's a push on the other side, right?
But if you're trying to be heard, how loud do you have to shout?
That's the problem. Is we're creating problems for our kids because of exactly what you're saying. We're creating these problems because there's so much push on both sides. There's a lot of, we're confused.
We're
right?
creating conversations that need to happen.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And heaven forbid a parent should be having conversations with their kids.
Absolutely. But, and you grew up with,
I'm being snarky, but I know.
Well, you grew up with some shitty people in your life, and I grew up with some pretty difficult people in my life, you know.
Sure.
I was fortunate enough that I had parents that I could talk to, you know, but I mean, I can't imagine growing up and having to go through that stuff with my parents. And you had people in your life that would not have accepted any of this stuff.
I didn't feel like.
And they probably wouldn't have at the time.
Right.
I mean, we grew up in the same town. I know that wouldn't have happened. Like, it wouldn't have been acceptable.
No.
In any way.
It would have been a major problem.
It would have been.
Yeah.
So I understand that.
And so as a result, I'm 6'3" and 280 pounds, and I have a full beard rather than.
And you're a beautiful woman.
I much rather would have stunted my growth and taken a different route, but it is what it is.
And there's exceptions to everything that's out there for sure. But I think there's a lot of going back to the CRT, I don't have a problem with my kids learning about this stuff. And that's what I was trying to explain. But it's when things get pushed and you don't understand it, it gets easy to lock onto a side that says, hey, that shouldn't be happening at all. It gets easy. Like it's easy to jump onto that side. You don't have to. You got other people fighting, so all you have to do is go regurgitate what they're saying.
Right.
And I get that. I don't know what the right answer is for the kids. I know that we're creating problems for our kids because exactly what you said. And we're not open to talking to our kids.
And I feel like the answer for our kids is to be able to have someone they can trust in the schools that they can talk to, that they don't have to worry about the parents finding out unless there's imminent threat of danger.
Sure.
Right. And I really believe that.
But we have to trust our schools.
We have to trust our schools to advise them in the correct way, not necessarily a way that the parents will love.
So maybe what we need to do, my suggestion would be, is that teachers should have to go through some sort of education on the correct way to be able to talk to kids. and there needs to be a way that's very neutral. In the medical profession, there's a lot of things I can't do unless I go for extra training in order
Right.
to do that stuff, right? In Washington State, I had to go through suicide training just so I could pick up on people that were, looking into suicide, right? It's just extra training. There should be people that have extra training so that kids know that they can go talk to those
I
people.
agree. I think that should be a part of the curriculum for an education degree.
Sure. It doesn't need to be part of the classroom, but it can be something that kids are aware of that they can go to. And it should be announced to the kids. That's what I think personally, right?
Right.
So hey, Joey, classroom. We know that there's a lot of confusion out there. If you feel uncomfortable for any reason, you are more than welcome to go to Mrs. Jones over here. Mrs. Jones is open to talk to you, and she's been through some extra training and whatever they have to tell them, right?
Sure.
And now that opens up the door, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. But I don't think there's a lot of doctors out there that shouldn't be doing a lot of things that they do, right? So there's a lot of teachers out there that shouldn't be doing things that they do. We talked about my daughter's teacher, shitty person.
Yeah.
I would not trust that person to be teaching my daughter anything.
Right. And rightly so.
So there needs to be designated people if we're going to go down that path.